Hi. Although I don't really do this, like a podcast type of thing, I feel like hearing what I want to say spoken rather than having to go through a thread of, reading a long post, which it would be really long. It's easier to understand, it's easier to feel a person's words when you hear them spoken as opposed to reading, especially posts, a thread, one out of 200, two out of 200, which is, it would be pretty long. So that's why I'm making this. I feel like it's something that needs to be said to help writers and readers when it comes to novels involving trauma. So this video is, or I'm going to make it into a video. It's an audio right now, but I'm making it into a video. So this video is going to be about trauma in novels from both the writer and the reader. So novels for when a writer writes about trauma, writes a character who is enduring it, surviving it, etc. And for readers who are reading a book that involves that includes it. But nothing I say in this is going to have, I don't have to put a trigger warning on any of this. I'm not going into any details about anything at all. There's going to be no mention of specific events, issues, inclusions in books, just what victims and survivors would deal with, how writers should handle writing from their perspectives, and a reader when they're faced with this. So I'm not being specific. I'll say the words like sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, but I won't actually speak of the actual act. So, but if you're currently in a place where you don't want to hear anything pertaining to it, anything at all, then you don't have to listen. So part of why I'm doing this, probably most of why I'm making this, is because of recent experiences with two beta readers, and I've got a longer audio video thing about my experiences with beta readers, since I had to clarify some things. There were some misconceptions on what my issues were. But this isn't about, this particular thing isn't about beta readers and those experiences. In that one, I will go into more detail when I come to that particular beta reader. I had two beta readers I had issue with, but that's not what this is. It's just because of what happened. Their reactions, things that they told me, which were completely over the top. They need to be addressed, but that's, for the most part, that's why I'm doing this. Not the only reason. There were a couple of others, like conversations and debates. I've noticed that we get into conversations about things like a person of a certain race can't write for another race, culture, religion, so forth. A man cannot write for a female character. A woman cannot write for a male character. An abled person cannot write from the perspective of a disabled person. So on and so forth. Things that I've done numerous times. But I do a lot of research. And so there's a lot of research in that. When I say a lot, I mean, I have tabs on top of tabs on top of tabs in my bookmarks. I speak to people. It's researching is an obsession for me. I just love to learn and So researching for me is not a job. It's the absolute best part of writing to me. Well, I guess maybe second best. The best is telling a story, but I just really love research. So yeah. So these things are possible. You just have to speak to people. you can't pretend like you're the one in the situation. You speak to numerous people. That's part of your research. You interview people that are in those situations. Write what you know, and I do. I I absolutely believe in that. Write what you know. For me, write what you know also includes research. So you don't have to actually be that person, be in that situation, as long as you've done a respectable amount of research and you're respectful to those people you're writing about. Your characters don't. If you're writing about real people, don't treat them like random characters. That these are real events, these are real situations that real people face. So, that's all I'm saying about that. You can write it, just be respectful. Do a lot of research. But one thing that and out of all that, writing with different cultures, writing for different genders, able people, disabled people, blah blah blah. What surprises me that I haven't seen, not saying that it hasn't been done, because I'm quite certain it has. I'm absolutely positive it has, but I haven't seen it. It doesn't seem to be a very popular thing to discuss, is writing the perspective of people who have been through traumatic experiences. Abuse, like sexual, physical, emotional, mental, that sort of thing. I've seen, I say traumatic experiences, like, not that their boat capsized and they watched their friend die. I'm specifically talking about abusive situations, assault. I've seen conversations about abusers. I've seen there was a recent thread, and this is part of the reason why I'm doing this. Part of the thing that sparked it. There was a thread. I don't remember what the thread was about, what the post was about, but I was following the conversation along with people who were replying, and someone brought up villains. Like, I think someone asked, like, how do you write from the perspective of a rapist or a serial killer if you're not a rapist or a serial killer? You know what I mean? Which is like, I mean, the some of the greatest writers in history haven't ever been serial rapists and serial killers, but they have these great, stories and stuff. How do you put yourself in those shoes? Well, I mean, as writers, we do find a way to do this. Sometimes we have to go into this deep, dark part of ourselves to do it. But we do, and especially the people who do the horror books, you do it. Doesn't mean that you're gonna act those things out, but which I have a story about that, but that's for another time. About an author that actually did those things. But most of us who are intelligent and rational and not insane, we do find ways to do that. We find a way to get into those villains' heads and the psyche, and write about that. But and they were writing about, and then the conversation went about the perspective of the villain. Like putting like the character, you're writing this character, you're putting yourself in their shoes, their perspective. Man, it's odd because that was a really long conversation, and there were debates and things like that, and I've seen that sort of conversation before about villains, but oddly enough, we don't discuss, at least to that degree that I've seen, we don't discuss how we put ourselves in the shoes of victims, of abusers, of rapists, of serial killers. I'm not saying that those discussions aren't out there. I just haven't seen them at all. Well, I've seen so many of these others. And so I started thinking about that. And I started thinking about people who write from that perspective. We can talk about the other stuff. We can argue till we're blue in the face about the other stuff, like how an abled person can write from the perspective of a disabled person, that sort of thing, and we can argue that so much, but then it comes to how does someone who has never been in that situation of trauma, of abuse, write from that perspective accurately, not being offensive, not being insulting, not being hurtful, or downplaying the situation, abuse or whatever. And I think, and I could be wrong. This is from my perspective. What I think that writing from about that characters from the perspective of a victim and survivor, it becomes a bigger rabbit hole than any of the others. You can say you're an advocate. You know, my friend went through this, my relative, wife, husband, etc. So I know these things from them. And so I know what I'm talking about. I know what they went through, okay. And I'm pretty sure 99.9% of the people who are, if anyone's even listening to this, people who are listening to this are probably already ahead of me saying you still don't, just because you know someone doesn't mean you know. And you're right. And I'm going to get to that. I've said this before in conversations, but I am a survivor, extensively. Now, things that I've been through weren't as bad as things other people have been through. I mean, I was with NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or I also call it NCMEC, for 20 years. CASA, that's the court appointed, where you kind of help to advocate for a child. I've seen many forms of trauma reactions, healing, not healing, overcoming, not overcoming, that sort of thing. I I've been through an extensive amount of abuse and neglect since I was a toddler, but I still know, based on my experience with all of these other children that I've seen their case files and such, their cases, they went through a shit ton more, even though every person, it's traumatic for them, it's terrible for them. I'm not, you don't downplay, and I'm not trying to downplay the things that I've gone through, especially since I'm 51 years old, and I've my entire life has been something, some one thing or another. And it was, I mean, I can just basically give you the Cliff Notes version. I'm the youngest of 5 kids by a lot. My oldest sister is 20 years older than me. My youngest sister is 10 years older than me, and the other two are in between them. There's 3 sisters and a brother is what I have. And at various points of my life since I was born, various points of my life, they have tried to kill me. Tried to smother me, drown me, beat me to death. They fed me a glass ornament when I was still I was in a stroller. I mean, they thought this was the funniest story to tell when I was a kid, to tell everybody in my family, was that they got a red glass ornament from the Christmas tree and gave it to me to make me eat it. And they thought it was a funny story to tell. And that's how kind of twisted my immediate family is, because they didn't they wouldn't, I don't know, they didn't process the fact that other people might think they were insane. They thought it was funny. So, this is, I had cousins who set me up to be assaulted. I had my oldest sister tried to get me kidnapped, trafficked like she did my other sister. So it's I have a lot of experience in a lot of this stuff. And if anybody's ever interested in that, I mean, I'm fine with talking about it. I would even make a video talking about it like I am with this. I have no problem with it whatsoever. Absolutely no problem with any of that. But what I'm saying is, not just me. I've known friends that have gone through it. I've seen other family members go through abuse. There was the case with my oldest sister. The FBI was involved in that. But even if I hadn't been affected, if I had never been a victim, survivor to anything, I've been so embedded with actively helping with the cases of abuse, sexual, physical, mental, child trafficking, because I've been a children's rights advocate, an activist, and an abuse advocate, men, women, children. So, I've been that for over 20 years. So, I'm pretty embedded in that. So, even if I hadn't actually been a victim, I could still write based on what I know from those things. Research. But yeah, so I'm hesitating because I want to mention something, but I don't want to invite a debate. But it's important. Okay. The man or bear thing. This is not about that. It's about the comments. Because I was reading, I read through comments when I see this. I've commented a couple of times, maybe twice. But I've seen the threads on Twitter. I've seen the threads on Instagram. But I don't comment. For the most part, I've commented once or twice on Instagram and a couple of times on Twitter. X, whatever you want to call it. But mostly I just read. And, it made me realize something because in the comments, I saw what I call cookie cutter arguments. People who had never been through trauma were trying to advocate for women who had, which is admirable. It's great. But here's the thing. I saw advocates arguing with each other about the best way to speak about it. Well, you can't say this. Well, you can't say that. Victims do this. No, victims do that. Victims don't do survive this. It's like, well, I read such and such. I read this and it says that this about victims. And, well, I read such and such and it says that about victims. It made me take notice that people don't truly understand that every victim is different and you can't follow a single list of some generic rules a victim must follow. Like the steps of anger or grief, sort of that list. You can't use a generalized itemization because no victim is the same as another. So as a writer, this is where research becomes a rabbit hole. I'm going to use an example. It's simple. It's a simple example, but everybody can understand it. And everybody would have feelings, opinions about it. So let's say you are writing a character who is blind. You would research the technicalities, like, you go in there, like medical reviews on blindness, if it goes that deep. I spent an entire day researching messenger pigeons when all I did was mention a messenger pigeon once in a novel. So I do go down those paths and research things that I probably won't need, but out of curiosity. So, but if you have to, if you're writing a book that does require it, you would research the technicalities about it, and you'd also speak to someone, if you're a good researcher, you'd also speak to someone who is blind for an accurate telling of their experiences, right? Okay. Some people are born blind, others become blind. So which one is your character? That's going to change your research. Did they have a supportive family or a neglectful one? If they became blind, was it an illness or an accident? Was it intentional? How old were they? Because this can heavily impact their experience with blindness as well. If they were 2 when they became blind, it's going to be a different experience than if they were 25 when they became blind. So you have to speak with someone whose perspective relates to your character. And when you do this, you also have to take into account their experiences at home, you know? So you have to take a little bit more. There's some little bit more you have to do. And when it comes to a victim of violence, sexual or otherwise, there are so many more factors. Was the victim happy-go-lucky? Nothing happened to them in their life? Everything going great? And then at say at 17 they're date raped. And it doesn't matter. This could be a man, woman, a girl, a boy, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm not even putting male or female in there because it happens to anybody. But just keep it that way. They're very sheltered. Everything's going right in their life. Everything's been perfect. 17 years old. They get date raped. Their response during and after, their mentality, etc., is going to differ completely from another person who's a date rape victim who was born into a traumatic life, be it sexually or physically, mentally, same age, same gender, same situation. Those two people will have different immediate reactions and different levels of trauma. They'll have different ideas of pain and of healing. You can't use a generalized idea that every victim is the same. Those two victims will not be the same. Now, let's say the second person that I just mentioned was just as sheltered as the first. No traumatic life, same date rape scenario. But the second person this time has a different mental process, like autistic or they're bipolar or anything you want. Just pick something. Their reactions are going to be different. The trauma process will be different. Then you have to look at their environment. Is a victim's family supportive? Apathetic? Do they have friends? Are they lonely? Have they suffered with depression in the past? What kind of upbringing did this victim or survivor have? What is the attitude towards sexual abuse in their environment, like their family or school or work or religion? Some families, they're all gung-ho about defending that person who was assaulted, while I have seen other families who are just like, they blame their family member. They blame their son or daughter. It's just horrible. It really is. Or, well, you need to take some responsibility for what happened too, type of, thing. So you need to know what makes that victim's experience that experience. Is it because of that? Is it because of them growing up like that, or did they not grow up like that? If you're going to write about an abuse victim, you have to learn more than one perspective. You can research online or in books, but speaking to survivors is best. And stop right here, because before you do this, please make sure the people you talk to are okay to talk about it. They may look at you like, what the hell are you doing? No, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you to use me for your research. I'm not your resource, I don't want to be in your book as a character. So make sure they're okay with everything. A lot of survivors want to talk about it. We want people to understand. We don't want for offenders to be able to hide in the darkness of ignorance, keeping people ignorant to the forms of abuse, the manipulation that takes place, the grooming, etc. This the secrecy helps other abusers carry on. Because it's that secrecy. It's when you don't let people know the process that was used on you to get you in a vulnerable state, or whatever your situation was. Then other people can't avoid that. If they get the same situation, and they hear the same or similar words, or the person puts them in the same environmental situation, stuff like that. So we're fine with talking about it and letting it out in the open, that because it could help somebody else. When I was with Nick Mick, my mantra was, silence is an abuser's best friend. I had it like everywhere. I wasn't only talking about the victim's silence, because you should never just expect a victim to speak up, even though it's ideal for them to do. And if they do, great, because it's a healing process. But when they're ready to talk about it, it's up to them. You never expect a victim to have to relive it if they're not ready. So just make sure. And if they say no, can't, then no, they can't, and leave it at that. Even those who are willing, like somebody might tell you, you might ask, like, hey, I know that you've been through such and such. Can we talk about it? I'm writing this novel and I have this character, and oh sure, yeah, absolutely, let's talk. But then all of a sudden, like, they're asking, you're asking them questions or something. You get to a point or something, and then they're all of a sudden they're like, okay, yep, nope, I can't do this anymore. We're done. Well, you know what? You're done. Say, oh, of course, you okay? We're okay. You're good, and thank you for your time, and that's it, and let it go. Some people are like me. I'll talk about anything within reason. As long as I feel like I can trust you. I don't mind sharing, but that's me. As a survivor, I know and understand that other survivors aren't like me. They want to be left alone. It's part of their healing. And it's perfectly normal and okay. Either of us. It's okay for me as a survivor to be open to talking, and it's okay for someone else who is a survivor to say, no, I'm done. I'm not going through that. I'm not talking about it anymore. I've had plenty of people tell me I need to write a book, since, hey, since you're a writer and you're writing anyway, why don't you write a novel? Why don't you write an autobiography type of thing? Why don't you write a book about all this stuff? People who know more than the little cliff notes I gave you here. And my response has always been, you know what? I've moved on. I don't want to have to, because in order to do that, I would have to put myself back into those situations, dig up those memories, and relive that stuff so that I can write it, accurately. And I don't want to do that. That's, I'll talk about it to someone who needs to help, but to write it, to go back into that, no. That's just not something that I want to do, because part of my healing process, I'm to the point where I've moved on. And once you do move on, you don't have to talk about it anymore. You don't have to dwell on that. And, there are other ways. There are other ways of dealing with it. I have what people would call self-insert. I don't know. Would you call that self-insert? Because I haven't written specifically my situations. I've just used my situations to help me, portray situations in the novel, or what the person is going through, or their healing, or whatever. So I don't know if you'd say that it's a self-insert. I'm just using what I know. It's therapeutic, though. The stories are fictional, the characters are fictional, the situation is fictional, but using what I know from firsthand experience, firsthand knowledge, it's therapeutic. So it's like kind of like I get to talk about it without talking. I get to write about it without writing about it. I guess you can say. I guess so. But I guess like if you haven't been through it, just please don't use a blanket statement. No survivors don't want that. Victims are this or victims are that. Please don't do this. We're not all the same. Every single victim and survivor of abuse is their own unique person with their own unique experience, their own unique mindset and personality, life that they've lived, life they're living, life that they have planned. We're all different, so we each process it completely different. Even if you see similarities with us, even those are handled differently in our heads. Environment affects it. Just absolutely everything affects it. Just keep that in mind. if you're gonna write these characters, keep that in mind. You're writing about events that, in some way, shape, or form, happen. If you're writing a fiction, I'm not talking about a fantasy. We don't all get gored by Cyclops or something. I was thinking a Minotaur. We're not gonna all, you're safe with that. You're not gonna hurt somebody's feelings about writing about a Minotaur goring someone because, but you know what I'm saying. Fictional but not fantasy. So there's a possibility that something you write, someone who reads it is going to be able to relate to. So, you just have to keep in mind that we're all different. We're all going to, experience it differently. Don't make it into a blanket statement. So, just keep that in mind. And now, for readers, and why I mentioned beta readers, one of the issues I face that I go into in the beta reader video that I have to edit, not edit, but put together, upload. She says some really incredibly vile things that you never say to a victim or a survivor. Is she a victim or a survivor? I don't know. But, well, she wouldn't be a survivor if she's still processing it this way to attack other victims. But, I don't know. I don't know if she is or not. I do know that later she did say that she is violently bipolar. Her words. Violently bipolar. So, I don't know. It's just the book she had read has a couple of traumatic scenes. It's actually quite a few. There's not just a couple. It's quite a few. She processed it in a really odd way. And I go through that in my editor thing, my beta reader thing. She responded with words that an abuser would tell their victim, or someone defending an abuser would tell their victim. It was I'm still flabbergasted at the things that she said. This was back in January, and I was going through a lot. And so when I read that from her, at first I was in shock for a few days. I had people telling me, she needs to give you your money back because, people who read what she wrote, other beta readers who read what she wrote, and they're like, what the, get your money back type of thing. And I was still kind of in shock. I was still kind of flabbergasted. So far, I had only read comments. A few days go by, and she turns in the actual longer report that she had made. It was it was so much worse. I didn't think it could get worse. It was so much worse. That took me out of being in shock and put me in a position where I I almost stopped writing. I actually almost stopped writing. I was going through a lot at the time. I had that weird writer's block that I've talked about that wasn't exactly writer's block, but it was something that was making me feel like I couldn't write anymore. On top of that, last November, I started coming down with this issue, these medical issues that doctors couldn't figure things out at all. And so come January, I was still dealing with it. Me and the doctors, we were still dealing with it. And then I'm better now for the most part, but then she so I'm going through all that, and then she hits me with this. I'm sorry, I keep clearing my throat. It's rainy here, like it has been for everybody for a few days, and so it's just I've got the windows open, and so it's it's like sitting in a steamy shower or something. So, it just the things that she said were, I've actually debated if I should post screenshots of the things that she said. I've shown it to people who've read the same novel, like my regular readers and beta readers, and I asked for their honest opinion. I said, you know what, just give me your honest opinion no matter what it is. I tell it to everybody. When it comes to reading something that I've written and it comes to reading other people's opinions, I want the truth. Tell me. I don't get better if you're going to lie to me. Every single person who saw her comments and her report were absolutely stunned. They thought she lost her mind. Now, keep in mind, this is before I was told that she actually said she's violently bipolar. It wasn't part of an excuse. She was actually using that when she was speaking to someone else, to try to excuse away something she had done to someone else, not me. But one of the people that saw her report, she's like, give me a couple of days to process this, because what the fuck did I just read? And when she came back, she's like, okay, you have really got to cut off communication with this person. I hope you are not still talking to this person. But I already had, But that's how bad it was. That was the worst one, thankfully. But recently, I had another beta reader who read a novel that I wrote this novel had absolutely no abuse whatsoever. In fact, the only trigger warning I've had with this one is with mental health, because one of the characters has an issue with depression. That's the only trigger warning this one gets. Except I don't have trigger warnings, but I have censored. I have my censored and my uncensored versions, and I have the warnings on tap as for each chapter that's going to be, that's going to have those scenes in there, the boom chicka wow wow type of scenes. This one, all of my novels I've dealt with, except for this one, I've dealt with some form of trauma. Serial killer, serial rapist, child trafficking, sex trafficking, domestic violence, that sort of stuff. This one has none of that whatsoever. None of it. It's like, I was even told, someone even said, one of the people that I showed this to was like, this one? This is the only tame novel you have? Are you sure she was talking about this one of all your novels? I mean, it was that she said I was the beta reader for this one. Accused me of glorifying abuse, saying that I should have had a disclaimer that if I had had trigger warnings about the sexual abuse, she never would have read it. There's there's no sexual abuse in this entire. There's not even anything that you can translate as that. Nothing. I mean, there's seduction, but then as soon as the person says no, it's done. It's over. It's the whole scene just it's like okay, we're good. Bye. Type of no means no. Okay, that's fine. There was no. I don't know what. It, I don't know. It just if you have a problem with someone with a character seducing another character, um, not grooming, not manipulating, not you know, abusively, but just flirting type of seduction. I mean, my God, we're adults. We do this. We can do this. It's fine. As long as the other person decides, I'm not interested. Just and you're like, oh, okay, sorry, and you're done. You're just, we'll go back to just this. We're fine. You know. But but that's the way it was. So I had another beta reader who read that one because I'm trying to get 4 of these books into a collection. So when I had found another beta reader, and I was really happy to get this guy to read this particular one because he's an IT tech, and I had some things in there that would require that kind of knowledge. And so when I was asking him about it, a guy, he even said to me, he said, well, yeah, it was tame, but, and he's the kind, he's really not interested in reading those scenes. So I have censored versions for people who don't want to read those scenes. And so he opted for not reading those scenes. But after he read what she wrote and I was asking him, he went back and he read them. Even though he wasn't too keen on it at first, he went back and he read them just so he could answer me. And he agreed. He said, yeah, that's odd. Nothing I read was like that. But he said maybe one of the scenes, maybe something that you had one of the characters say or do, or maybe that particular setting, maybe something happened to her that was very close to something, maybe it was something that was very close that happened to her. And once that memory got triggered, her memory just wouldn't go away. And she stuck with that instead of what you actually wrote. And, yeah, he's absolutely right. I can absolutely see that. And this is why in the open letter to beta readers that I posted on Twitter, I mentioned that if you have any trauma, tell the writer before you agree to beta reading so you can discuss it. And if you're still traumatized by an abusive event, stay away from novels with relationships. If you're traumatized by domestic violence or parental abuse or things like that, and that the book is it's romantic, between a couple it's a romantic thing, or if you know that it's about familial relationships, father, mother, this and that, and you've been through a traumatic thing dealing with those relationships, even at work, if it's a work environment type thing, and what this book is about, and that's what stay away from those until you've healed and you're a beta reader, because you're not going to be doing anyone any good by reading it. So going back to the first beta reader that I mentioned, the one that was really bad with the horrific comments, and even the comments about the man or bear question, I see a lot of people with a misconception of victims and survivors and how we process things. They have this mentality that we're all the same and we all deal with it the same. In my novels, my characters react in different ways to their trauma. I try to give a window into how because each character is different. Every one of my characters are different, so they're going to respond to things differently. My first one, the tail of the butterfly and the crane. Now this one doesn't, it's not heavy into that, but there are some issues in there, things that happen, and the victim, or near victim, deals with it in the way that that particular character would deal with it. Deals with it in a time frame that, you know, for that particular character and what she was going through and what she was dealing with, and the guy who had things happen to him, you know, their environment made a huge impact on how they overcame things. Let's see if I can pronounce this correctly again. Um, uh, Xiechi. I'm sorry, I always mispronounce my own book. Xiezhi, the one with the on the cover. It's the monster snout with the snarling teeth. Xiechi, Xiechi. Okay, Xieji, Xieji. There we go. So that one is heavily involves child trafficking, sex trafficking, um, abuse, but parental abuse of the daughter, not just like child abuse type of things. Um, it deals a lot of that in the entire novel. I even address issues of prostitution, the prostitutes in the brothels, and how they were quote unquote trained. So that one's heavy into that. Cultivating Lilies is the tame one. The only thing that you really have to worry about that one would be the depression. But she has something else that she's dealing with in regards to losing her parents. The Detective and the Socialite. There is a secret society, and there is a serial killer rapist involved with them in that. So she overcomes things the way that she overcomes things. Um, I had a reader ask me. They sent me a message on Tapas, and they were, just very, hey, love it so far and everything. But I'm just curious, for somebody to have gone through what she went through, do you think she maybe healed a little bit too quickly? Got over that, because that is really, it took us kind of going back and forth a little bit for me to realize I had not properly explained the time frame between what happened to her and months and months later when she's healing. So that person actually helped me. I'm like, oh my God, you thought this was like a week later? No, absolutely not. No, sorry. I'm sorry about that. And so, but thank you for helping me fix it. And so I did fix it. It was like 6 or 7 months later, and how she dealt with it, she had a huge support system. She was extremely smart. She was part of a sorority, and she still had her best friends. She grew up with these people. Her mother, she had a lot of things that she was able to deal with that helped her deal. Her environment helped her deal with it. There are survivors who have no support system. It would take a lot longer, probably many years for what happened to her, without a support system, without people to talk to, without people to help you heal. Most of healing is the environment. Most of a victim's healing is the environment. You can't, so if you don't know their environment, if you don't know how they grew up, what they grew up with, the attitudes, then you can't cookie cutter any victim's healing, because there are too many factors affecting that. So my next one, mooncakes. Now, this one, I actually point blank brought up the whole issue of self-doubt and the way that people believe survivors should heal. So the character in that one, she was talking to the other main character, and I always have two main characters in my stories because I like to tell the stories from both points of view, from both sides. So she was talking to him, and she asked him, "Do you think something's wrong with me?" Because this is like, I'm paraphrasing, but she's basically asking him, "Do you think something is wrong with me because I feel this way? And maybe it's too soon. Maybe something's wrong with me in my head that I'm able to move on so quickly." And the person she's speaking to, he's an assassin. It's his job to rescue mostly children, but other victims of abuse. And he tells her, don't compare yourself to others. You heal at your own pace. And, a little bit more than that. But this is my way of getting the message out to victims and survivors and anyone who thinks they know how long healing should take. So yeah, I'm not even going to. I've got After Moon Cakes is a Moon for the Mountain. That's my pirate one. That's the one that's got, yeah. Because I take both my main characters. I take them from cradle to all the way, not death, not cradle to the grave, but cradle all the way, to adulthood and when they meet and everything else. And both of them had some questionable experiences in life, especially him. So, and I deal with that the best way that I can. So, Raven and Fox is, yeah. That's neither here nor there. We won't discuss Raven and Fox. That's that's an erotica, so we're not even going to discuss that. So, moving on. So this whole perspective of how long it should take someone to heal. You can actually say some very hurtful things when you get this mentality that you think you know stuff. Or maybe maybe you're a victim and you just want to lash out at everybody. I don't know. I was told very recently that I wasn't raped hard enough if I've moved on and can talk about it. This was under one of the posts about that damn bear, because I said I would choose man because I know I can't fight an angry bear. I was looking at this question as a pointed question. Would you choose to run into a man or would you choose to run into a bear? What? You know what? I know my limitations, and I hate to admit this, but if I saw a bear in the woods, I would probably try to make friends with that damn bear. I wish I was joking. I already know that's probably what's going to happen to me. Is I'm going to try to squeeze the cheeks of some cute fluffy thing and I'm going to get mauled, But, I mean, I know that I can't fight an angry bear. At least I can stand a chance with a human. And besides, I wouldn't be in the middle of the woods alone without protection anyway. And I've heard other people tell survivors, well, obviously what happened to you wasn't that bad. I wish I was exaggerating, but yeah, comments towards survivors really do get that way sometimes by some people. That I don't know if they think that, I don't know. I'm not going to try to get into a person's head that says comments like that. Not worth it. But it blows my mind the callous things that people can say. Even when they think they're being kind and compassionate. Not those two, obviously. But even when people think they're kind and compassionate, they can say some of the most callous things. Like, you never tell a victim or a survivor how long to take. I will say that. You You never judge them for however long it's taking them to heal. If they're still struggling or if they say they're better now, whether it's a month, a year, 5 years, or never, you don't do that. Everyone processes things differently, whether it's abuse or grief or whatever it may be. It isn't your right to dictate healing toward anyone. It isn't your trial, your tribulation, your trauma. You don't get to give anyone a timeline on healing. You don't get to expect it and you don't get to demand it. When it comes to writing these characters, you have to understand as a writer, sorry if I'm bouncing back and forth, but as a writer, you don't when it comes to writing them, you don't have you sorry. You have to understand these things. Can you write if you've never been through it? Of course you can. We want you to. Get the word out, spread the message. We need more people speaking out and advocating for victims' rights in whatever way you can, even if it's a fictional book. You know, it's a made up situation, a made up story, made up character. You know, if that's what you want to use to speak up, go right ahead. The more the better, please. Just remember that every victim and survivor is different. You can't make blanket statements in your novel. You don't say survivors or victims need this, they need that. They do this, they do that. They never do this, they never do that. No, the ones you spoke to need this or that, or do this or that. Maybe the one or person you spoke to told you this. But they don't speak for every survivor, and you should not speak for every survivor. When you do and you speak like this, like it's the norm, then those who had a different outcome or they're at a different part of their healing process will be made to feel like something's wrong. They'll start to doubt their process. They'll start to doubt their progress. They'll start to doubt their counselor, whoever it is that they're seeing. Self-doubt is one of the processes that we go through. And by pushing this blanket statement, it brings out that self-doubt. It keeps us there if we haven't moved past it yet. We live these doubts constantly. It's a huge burden. We wish we could know what it's like to not go through it, to have to wonder, to have to interview because we don't know. We don't know, we don't know what your world is like. When I say your, I mean those of you who have never been through this. We don't know what your world is like. We don't even know what another survivor's world is like. So we don't judge. Your entire brain changes. We see things completely differently. We feel completely differently. And each of us has a different way of seeing and feeling. Like that man and bear question. Other survivors have a completely different way of seeing that than I did. You shouldn't send a message that the process should be any particular way. Healing should take any particular time. You should make a victim feel like they're healing too slowly or too quickly. Make a survivor wonder if they haven't healed because you're saying it was too fast or they missed step 1 or 3 or 6. Now for me, I'm at a point in my life where I can usually just say, you know what? You have no idea what you're talking about. Shut up. And move on from the conversation. Then again, that's because of other aspects of my life where I had to do that to survive situations like living with my family. I disowned them years ago, officially 2005. And I moved on to better things. Other survivors they won't have that same experience. So those words will have a different impact. It doesn't take much at all. If you're writing something and and this sounds like something that you wrote or whatever, don't think that, oh my God, how am I going to change all that? Just a word or two. Just go in and instead of making it a blanket statement, just say some survivors, some victims. Well, others may feel this way. Well, others might, something. Just one sentence or an additional word or two, and you cover your ass and you help a person reading this so they can say, okay, yeah, some might. This isn't what for me, but, this is the way in this for this character, and that's okay that it wasn't my way of doing it, my way of healing or processing. That's all it takes. Just a word or two, a sentence maybe. Please understand that every victim has a different personality, a different experience, a different mentality, a different upbringing, lifestyle. Everyone is different. Everyone is different from each other. And this applies to absolutely anything in life, not just trauma, but anything in life. There are 8 billion people on this planet. 8 billion people have 8 billion different ways of seeing things and 8 billion different ways of healing. Keep that in mind. Interview multiple people, but again, don't be pushy. If they say, nope, not for me, then it's nope, not for them. As a reader, understand that the character you're reading doesn't represent every survivor, every victim. It only represents the character you're reading about. This also means you don't tell the writer who may have been through those things that they wrote the situation or the character the wrong way. That it would never happen. That victims don't react that way. That survivors don't react that way. That isn't how a victim heals. No, that is not how you believe some victims heal. But yes, that is how some heal and get through it. Just because the writer doesn't come out and tell you their history as a victim, don't assume they aren't or weren't. It's safer to realize that they may have been, and maybe this is a self-insert of someone who is using this as part of their healing. Like I said, writing is therapeutic, and you have no right taking that away with your limited understanding. And if you were a victim, then you need to understand your situation is different from the writer's, who is using their personal experience to write that of their character. You don't know that writer's life and what they've been through. Maybe they weren't a victim, but they spoke to 24 different victims and chose one or a culmination of them all. Even if you aren't saying those words to the writer, you're saying it about other victims. So the good thing about a fictional character is that a writer gets to create that character's fictional reaction. The writer knows what they want of that character. They know the world they want for that character. They know the world that character lives in that probably isn't the world you live in, and this is what helps that character grow and evolve through the chapters. Let them tell their story. Don't think of what has been accepted as the blanket ideals. We aren't in a textbook. Even a psychiatrist will say what's written in a book about victims is the basics. It's a building block to kind of put yourself in their shoes, but they will have to lead you the rest of the way. So I'm going to wrap this up. I just realized this is like over an hour now. But I hope that I've helped sort of, since like I said, I just don't see the conversation anywhere. And, maybe this will, get the conversation started. When you're talking about writing about trauma victims, you're talking about your character as a trauma victim. That sort of trauma. I mean, like I said, I'm not talking about the Titanic. So yeah, just, if this was any help at all, let me know. If you have questions, let me know. You can message me on Twitter. I think my DMs are open. You might have to give me a minute because I get so many half-naked women trying to add me onto their lists in my inbox. So I don't know why. And it's like, why is it always that way? It's always the half-naked women. But when it comes to the men, they're always either trying to get me to buy crypto or they're creepy. Anyway, so let me know if this helps. And I will be putting up the beta reader reading one too as well. Maybe I'll do both of them today, post them both on the same day. I'll see. See you later. Bye.